Hello people, this is question time video. Obviously it's a bit later because obviously Friday and Saturday I was busy, so this is a Sunday morning I'm doing this. I did find this episode a bit boring anyway, which didn't really help, but there is a few good questions again after watching it this morning to get a recap. So yeah, like I've said before, this is just my own opinion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, I'm just having an opinion. So yeah. Let's get on to question number 1.
Is from Chris Seeley, please. Chris Seeley.
Theresa May wants a 2-year interim deal paying £20 billion before we finally leave Europe. Is this what we really voted for?
Right, so this is a very interesting question that is way more complex than any debate can be. The EU was never going to be, the Brexiteers, they know, the MPs that wanted Brexit, they knows exactly what the process would be like. They knows there's going to be chaos. And that's why they're constantly closing down people who's coming out and just saying what the problems are. Nowadays we're not allowed to talk about the problems because that's talking the country down. That's just wrong. We've got to look at the problems to solve them as a country. And if we're not allowed to say what the problems are, then how the hell are we meant to come together as a country to try and solve them? It's like the Brexiteers don't want to talk about those questions, those big fundamental questions, and like they said, some of the panels, the end game. What is going to be the end game? What is the Tory party's policy of what our country is going to be like? They're just. I hope within that party that the Brexiteer side gets their way, but I fear they're not. I fear that. No, the Brexiteer way is gonna get their way. I fear the Remainer side are trying their best to try and say, look, we've got to look at the problems, but because the Brexiteers got that vote, that's making them stronger to not listen to them. And I fear that Tory party now is turning more towards the UKIP party than an actual Tory party now. The deal was always going to be a long-term thing. I think even this 2-year policy, it's not long enough. People's got to understand we were in the EU for 40 years. We made decisions. We voted for policies at the EU level. We agreed policies at the EU level. What the EU has turned into now, we are, as a country, partly responsible for what the EU is now. But Brexiteer people always talks about it in a way that means like in an innocent way that, oh well, we have nothing to do with it. No, we've been in the EU for 40 years. We've helped make the EU what it is today. And now we're blaming the EU for what it is today and trying to make out that, oh no, we didn't want. Our governments, whoever was in government, went to the EU and agreed deals and budgets and programs and all those types of things. Yeah, we've paid in a lot of money, but at the same time, we've helped other regions through the EU policy of helping other poorer countries. So the EU's got a poverty budget that we hand out. I can't remember what the name of it now is. But we know we give aid to poorer countries, but then at the same time the EU also is a subsidy, also helps subsidise the EU giving aid to poorer countries to push them up. Because the problem with really poor countries is they don't help humanity, they drag humanity back down. So the whole point of aid is to push those countries up to increase humanity's overall benefit. So I think the EU does a hell of a lot that hasn't been talked about. And let's go to the elephant in the room. Dave Cameron did not put up a decent enough fight against his Brexiteers within his party because he was thinking more about uniting his party after the vote than he was about the actual fighting for what's the best interest for the country. And this 2-year interim deal just means more confusion, more unknowns, leakage information coming out from the negotiations, hitting the markets. The markets are going to be like a massive roller coaster for the next 3 to 5 years, easy. And all the cuts we're actually seeing fundamentally now hitting us, and it's hitting us real bad. Our public sector has never been in such bad decisions. When you've got police officers coming out, top officers within the police department coming out saying our budgets can't go much further, it's a terrible situation. And all this budget cuts was from 2008. That we haven't really seen any real big impacts hitting the public sector and the average person from Brexit. We won't until 2019. Well, maybe even 2020. It would probably be the last year of these. So if we leave in 2019, it'd probably be 2021 that our politicians, whoever is in power, it doesn't matter who's in power, would have to do some really bad decisions that is going to really hit this country. And they're going to take the hit for it because they can't turn around and blame the EU, but they've got to do what they've got to do. And I don't think there's that mentality to do that, because the only reason the country's in such a state it is now is because when the Tory party got into power in 2010, one of their key policies is they would not raise tax. It was all about cuts, and we can make all the cuts we want and we can pay off the debt like that. And now in 2017 we can see that policy has been a complete failure. Tax hasn't gone up, but yet all the cuts has hit has had a massive effect on everything from the NHS to policing. Figures say that crime's come down, but I even doubt that, to be honest. I reckon that's probably a twist on spin on the figures or something to try and make everything look so it's not as bad. Because the more bad news you get, it creates a prophecy of even more cycling of bad news. So there's a lot of twisting in government, like child poverty. That was one of the classic ones when the Tory party reclassified child poverty, only because they could reclassify it and it doesn't look that bad. They can deny that it's that bad. But I just don't see nothing good coming from this Brexit. And if we lose, once we're down that road and we've left, the Brexiteers knows there's no going back. But countries around the Western world is looking for a very financially wealthy country to plunder on the markets. And I fear the UK is going to be that prime target now, because we're a wealthy country within the EU. We give the EU billions of pounds. But the thing you've got to remember is we make billions of pounds from being in the EU. So the problem we've got now is we're going to be out of the EU. All these massive, lovely trade deals is a dream pipe at the moment because the UK haven't even got an experienced trade department. All our trade was done from within the massive department of the EU Trade Department. They've got a massive organisation that deals with all these trade deals, and we had that. We had access to that. We had a lot of already agreed trade deals with many countries that ain't talked about. I think altogether, when I was looking at research during the vote, there was about 14 countries that the EU's already got a signed up-to-date trade deal with them. And the UK could go to those countries and get trade straight away. And that's why I go back to what Dave Cameron didn't talk about any of this. He didn't say nothing about the UK having to set up a trade department, which is going to take more than 350 million a week. Well, first off, trade negotiators don't come cheap. I think their wages are over 100 grand easy a year, and then they probably get some type of commission if they sign a great trade deal. We ain't got any of that. And what I find really funny is just go and see who's our most experienced trade negotiators. Most of them are employed from the EU itself. And I just think, oh my god, we're leaving the EU and we've got the likes of EU citizens from other countries within the EU actually negotiating for our deals. Oh, it's chaos. It's complete chaos. And that 2-year interim deal is going to go way longer than that. At the end of that 2-year interim deal, we're going to be in. It ain't good. It is not good at all. It's complete chaos, and I'm not saying that because I'm in a like ideology group of Remaining. I'm actually looking. I actually looked, and everything I looked at, it was just chaos. It's causing chaos and isolation. Even though the likes of Nigel Farage likes to play it like, well, no, we're not going to leave them, but part of the EU is protection. It protects you, and we're leaving that protection because so-called it's better outside. No, it's complete chaos, people. I'll move on now because I could go on for a long time about that, and I could start looking up all the details, what made me come to my decision. But what's the point? You still get Brexiteers denying it and saying that's crap. So it's pointless going on really about the actual facts and details of what actually happened in the EU, because it's only the headline news that gets people convinced that that's the truth. So I'll move on to the next question now.
Hucker, let's have your question next, please.
For how long will the world leaders put up with King Jong-un and his provocative firing of weapons?
So, North Korea, innit? I'll just call him Kim Con, or I don't know, Kim, yeah. The leader of North Korea, I think there's a lot of truth in what some of the audience was saying. I think it was the last guy that said that, isn't this a sign of a leader that's struggling to stay the dictatorship in a very nasty system? And he thinks if he could get nuclear weapons to threaten any challenger within that country, it would make him a stronger leader. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I really do. That really did resonate with me. As for the long-age question, can a country have nuclear weapons? And to be honest with you, I think there's something like 7 or 8 countries that's actually a nuclear state, got nuclear weapons. And I just think, well, if we're if humanity's such a free species, and we believe in freedom, then surely these 8 countries should say, well, okay, he wants to be a nuclear state. Alright, an agreement that if you want to be a nuclear state, you've got to abide by these state rules, and if you go against them, we'll all fire the nuclear. That's the one simple treaty that needs to be signed. But then it comes into so much complex equation. Nuclear weapons is not good, and I agree with Jeremy Corbyn on a lot of this issue, because don't get me wrong, I used to be a firm believer of you hit somebody back just as hard as they hit you. So that's how I was brought up in the playground. But you can't really scale that up to nuclear, can you? Because a nuclear bomb isn't a bully in a playground hitting you. It's wiping out millions of people. Especially the more bigger bomb. I think it's the hydrogen bomb or something. That is like magnitude bigger than just a standard nuclear bomb that was used on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I believe it is. So they were tiny. The explosion and the instant destruction is actually bigger in a hydrogen bomb than it is what was used back in that time when America made the decision to use that nasty weapon. And and now the Americans act like they're the ones that don't believe in using them. Yeah, but you've already used them in your past. So what the guy on the left, I can't remember his name, on the right, sorry, was saying about that small part of the American right that thinks nuclear weapons are fun. Well, he's talking truth, because America actually did agree to go and drop bombs in the time of war. So we need to get that straight to start off with. So I think it's very rich for the Americans to act as if they got some kind of moral ground on this. They were the first country, and I hope the only country, to use nuclear weapons in the time of war. But there's no guarantee of that, because nobody knows what the future holds. And you look at, I think the responsibility of having a nuclear weapon probably makes a party or a dictator grow up, because if they use them, they know that they're going to get them back, and that's your point of having a nuclear weapon, isn't it? It's like a bully. If a bully hits you, you hit it back. But I just think when it comes to nuclear weapons, thinking like that is stupid, because all you end up doing is wiping us out. We're the people. We're the ones that get bombs, not the politicians, not the wealthy. The wealthy will probably go off to their bunkers and what they bought, and it would be the average people that would be wiped out in one massive explosion on both countries that decides to nuke. But you cannot take it away. It only takes one total idiot to do it. And I suppose the question you've got to ask is the North Korea leader that desperate where he feels he's got nothing to lose by using a nuclear weapon? It's possible, isn't it? I don't think nobody can rule it out, especially if he feels very insecure as the North Korea leader, and then you've got China also trying to topple him. So he's a very, very, very dangerous person at the moment. And I think instead of countries trying to attack him and bring him down, I think they should try and start calming everything down. Because the more that they tries to topple him, the more dangerous he becomes. Just like anyone, you push somebody to the edge where they've got nothing to lose, they're more likely to do the most dangerous thing possible. And from an individual point of view, that would probably be trying to kill someone. But from a country's point of view, if they do get an actual working, well, by the sound of it, they've got working missiles now. The only thing they've got to get right now, by the sound of it, is their nuclear weapon to fit on there and make sure it's secure. So I would say it's a very dangerous time, but then how do you solve it? If you solve it by dropping bombs, ain't you just as bad as him? Because you're fearing he's going to fire weapons and blow other countries up, but yet you can't be the first person to do that, can you? If you're the first person to go and do that, you're just as bad as he is. So, I think we should be trying to help him and make him grow up by having nuclear weapons. I know that sounds mad, but there's 8 countries on this planet with nuclear weapons. If they all got together and said, right, if anyone develops nuclear weapons, they've got to come and sign on to this deal, and if they use nuclear weapons, we will take a look under the reason why you fired them, and we will retaliate. If that's, again, it's humanity's complex. Not all countries are going to agree, and it links onto what the UN said. The UN is complex because every country gets a veto or can disagree with something, and people saying, well, it's pointless. Well, no, it's not pointless. It's just showing how much humanity is chaos. You know, think of each country as a human being. We're all having a say. Each country is having a say, and just like in a country where people disagree with what political party should be in power, at an international stage, that is just emphasised again. And you can't turn around to one country that vetoes it and turn around and say, well, your vote don't matter. You've got to try and come to some type of agreement, and that is a very slow and painful procedure, and we shouldn't lose faith in that, because we've got to understand other countries' point of view, and that's what makes it so complex. And it just shows how complex humanity's become because of our systems and because of greed and because of growth and all that crap. And I know that's nothing to do with what we're talking about here, but it feels like the North Korea leader is very nervous about being toppled, and I think a lot of that is coming from the international community trying to stop him, and the more they do that, the more likely he's going to become at the point where he feels he's on a cliff and he's got nothing to lose. So it's very dangerous, and I just feel leaders should be dampening it down and saying, right, okay, but it is what it is, isn't it? So I'll move on to the next question now.
Is Vince Cable likely to be Prime Minister?
Is Vince Cable, to be honest, from this question time, I think he let himself down. The first thing was when he said, if we leave the EU, he let himself down on that, because we all know that if you don't leave all the other trade unions, then you're not really leaving the EU. I think that's fundamental, and he said that himself. He didn't say it in layman's terms, but when he said if we leave the EU, that is an admission that if you don't leave all the custom unions where all the jobs are, then we're still in the EU essentially. But then the problem with being like that is we don't get the decision making. We've turned the decision making away. We don't want nothing to do with the decision making of the direction and the rules that governs the single trade market within the EU. But yet we still want to trade with it. Ugh. We got to. It's not because we choose. We got to. It's a massive trading block. If we walk away from that, we're going to lose a lot of jobs. And if people lose their jobs, tell you now, the welfare state ain't there anymore for people to claim. It's been totally destroyed by the Tory party, that's for sure. So jobs are everything, and I think that's what it should be. It should be a job-led Brexit, and if that means we've got to still pay in to have access to the trade area, that's got to happen. But I think Vince let himself down badly on that, and then he let himself badly down on the next question, which I think is tuition fees. And he was justified. He was talking like a Tory person, and I don't like that. He was justifying and trying to say, well, I was rescuing the 60% of taxpayers. No, that is a Tory speech. I was very surprised when I heard that from Vince. I didn't think I would ever hear Vince trying to talk like a Tory MP, to be honest. I think he had a very bad time on this episode of Question Time. But answering the question of, he's the leader of the party. Generally, minus this question time, I have generally liked what he says. So I think he stands a reasonable chance of getting the party in a better position. But I think he needs to get his party clear. And the only reason Lib Dem's done so bad in the last election is because the media was on a frenzy with Tim over his issue about his beliefs and being honest, which I think is disgusting. The media turned an honest guy away from public life, which is disgusting. So now we just got a bunch of lawyers. Well, like I said, he can be but he's going to have to come up with good policies to win people over, and that ain't going to be easy in this current climate, obviously. So I'll move on to the last question now.
Have your question, can we, please? James.
Should university tuition fees be increased or decreased?
Simple question. Should fees...
This question really gets under my skin because the Tory party has managed to turn education into a cost and not an investment. If the Tory party gets their way, they'll probably end up getting parents paying for their schooling. All parents will have to start paying for their kids' education because the state can no longer afford it because it's a cost. And why should the 60% of people pay for children to get educated? It really gets under my skin. Education is a benefit for the country. It's not a cost for bankers to have massive loans to make massive profits. This is all this has come about because towards the end, Labour was gutless to put the tax up to pay for it, and the Tory party has been gutless since they've been in power in 2010 to put tax up to pay for these investments. Education is an investment. Now, I'm not saying all people should go to university. Far from it. I think better to get a trade under you and experience in the working environment than to go to university. I suppose a lot of it depends on what you want to do. That's the key part. If you want to become a lawyer or something like that, then I think university is probably the best place to go. Or if you want to do something higher up in IT, I think you've got to go to university because there are really complex things to do and you need to go there. And again, it is not a cost. I hate it. If any of you hear people talking about higher education or tuition fees as a cost to taxpayers, just put them right. Just say no, it is not a cost. It's an investment for the country, and it helps the country. It helps everyone because those people gets the better paying jobs, then they can get better. Then they can make more money for the big company that they're working for. Then the government gets taxed back from that. They tax that individual. The company makes more money. They're happy. They're happy to invest more money into the country. Oh, it really does make me mad. It is not a cost. It is an investment, and I feel it should be. It definitely should be free. All of us should pay for it. It should never be painted as a cost on taxpayers because it's an investment for the country, and we need that more now than we've ever had. Now we're going out into the real world where we've got to make our own trade deals. We need trade negotiators trained to the highest standards within university because we need trade negotiators. We need that experience. We need the best from university who studied trade negotiations and could get the best deal for the country. And that's where university comes in. It's across the field. It is better to have that. And I just feel making it, make the clever people who could get a position in a job will more likely just go and get the job and not really worry about. And there's nothing wrong with that, but isn't it better to have that certificate to say that you've done this? It gives you, later down the road, it gives you a better opportunity of getting an even better paying job. But then, I can understand some people saying you don't need it. Like the woman that did talk and said, well, I worked hard and I'm in a very good position. I've paid this off, I've paid that off. Great, but I think education is everything in life, and we should never allow politicians to turn that into a cost when it's not. Education, regardless of influence, all the way up to higher education, all of it should be free because it's a benefit to the country. And in the long term, which politicians don't like talking about, they work from election to election. But the long term, for having free education across the board, it benefits the country. It brings more companies here because we've got the best trained, educated, higher educated people that can do these complex jobs. And the certificate brings big companies here. Also, it links to experience. You know, people who've never been to a university's got experience. Some of them are just as capable of doing it as them, but it's the pieces of paper from the good universities that gets big business coming here, and I fear having all these costs it's just kicking a lot of debt down the road, and it's chaos. I think I'll stop it there because this has gone a little bit over 30 minutes. I didn't expect it to go that far, but yeah. Thanks for watching. You know, if you agree with what I'm saying or you disagree, just do the thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm not worried which one it is, because we live in a democracy. I understand some people watching this will hate what I'm saying. Thumbs down. If you agree with what I'm saying, thumbs up. And if you know, if there's some things you agree with and there's some things you don't agree with, just make a list of what you agree with, what you don't, and then whatever comes out on top, you just thumbs down, thumbs up. Simple as that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and if you have watched it all the way to the end, thank you very much. Until next Thursday, well, next Friday, hopefully, if I'm not too busy. Ta-da.